Nick Caserio shooting down those leaving rumors. Got to talk about that on today's episode. And are the Texans really willing to move on from the number 2 overall pick? I smell cap. Or do I?
To tie it all in, we want to develop a great team here that we can deliver wins to the city of Houston. We want to deliver a championship here to the city of Houston, and that's what it'll be about.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to a Tuesday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Sorry about missing out on Monday. However, today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL general manager and managing your own football franchise? Then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code Locked On in all caps in the game. I'm John, some sports guy Hickman. Of course, I'm joined by none other than Texan and Rockets beat reporter, Sports Illustrated's own Cody Davis. And make sure you are subscribed to the Locked On Texan podcast on the YouTube channel and also on your major podcasting platforms. Before we get started, I want to thank everybody that shouted me out over the weekend with the congrats and everything. Me being a pop now, Cody eventually is going to be Uncle Cody. So really appreciate it. And sincerely from my heart to you guys' ears, man, thank you very much. Now, y'all didn't come to hear all that Google Gaga baby talk. Y'all want to talk about Nick Caserio. Y'all want to talk about what he had to say and how he defended himself from the rumors that started to spiral out of control over the weekend. Cody. We got something for him. What you got for him? We got a clip of the press conference. We can get that played.
And then, before we take any questions, quite frankly, I'm almost embarrassed that I have to say anything. Honestly, I feel like Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street. But I'm not leaving. There's never really been any substantive discussions of the sort. Grateful and appreciative of the opportunity that my family and I have here in Houston. We understood when we arrived, when we got here, that there was a lot of work to be done. And I think when you look across the NFL landscape, there's work to be done in every organization. And I think we've made some progress where we still have a lot of work in front of us. Certainly, it's been a joy to work with D'Amico in concert as we build the team and continue to build the staff. Unfortunately, I think this time of year, there's a lot of information and a lot of topics that are discussed. Some are more accurate than others, and I think it transcends multiple landscapes. But I can't. I'm honestly, I'm almost embarrassed that I have to say anything, but I feel like I have an obligation to to make that statement. Really try to stay ahead of it. I don't think there's anything else to talk about or to say or any question about it. Again, appreciative of the opportunity that we have here. Very grateful. And my philosophy and goal is just try to do the best job that I can for the people in this organization, in this building, for the city. And as long as ownership approves of what we're trying to do, then, certainly their support is welcomed. So having said that, we'll take some questions here and go from there.
That was Nick Caserio addressing the leaving rumors. And Cody, I gotta say, man, I love the Wolf of Wall Street joke. I think everybody immediately got it. And if you've seen that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, you saw the passion behind the "I'm not leaving" speech, the infamous "I'm not leaving" speech. And so for Nick Caserio, he's not able to actually go out there and "I'm not leaving." He probably would want to in the moment. But I do love that. I also had a quick takeaway that he will be around as long as ownerships approve of some of the decisions. And so that goes back to, when Lovie Smith was fired, he is still, in my humble opinion, he's still on the short rope. And as long as he is working well with others, and I think that is where the rumors started to come about. You hear about what they're going to do at number 2, which we'll get into, and what D'Amico wants, maybe what he wants. And I think Caserio still understands that because of his prior seasons as a general manager for the Texans, he's not allotted the amount of time of mistakes anymore. So that was my takeaway from that. But overall, I love the fact that he came out and said, you know what? These rumors as of right now are false. These rumors as of today does not mean 2 weeks after the draft I'm leaving. That doesn't make any sense to me. We both said that, Cody. So good to hear Nick Caserio stand up in front of the rumors, in front of the bullet, dodge the bullet, and explain his side of the story, and also go into some deep details in Nick Caserio's way about other things.
Well, first, let me just say this. Maybe Nick Caserio and Laramie Tunsil, that might be their favorite movie. Because if you remember, about a month or so ago, when Laramie Tunsil announced that he signed his extension, he used that same clip from The Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah. So maybe that's just the Texans' favorite movie. But, John, I 100% agree with you. I like the fact that Nick Caserio, before he took any questions from anybody, he came right out and said that he wasn't going anywhere. However, John, listeners and viewers, I'm taking that as him saying that I'm not going anywhere as of right now. And what I mean by that is, John, you just hit the nail on the coffin when you take a look at the short leash that he has now. And that's very telling, because I remember when Nick Caserio first got here and he signed, what was it, like a 6-year contract or a 7-year contract? 6 year. Yeah, thank you. And, the last 2 years, his first 2 years being the general manager of the Houston Texans, it hasn't been pretty at all. And I understand that he did not walk into a good situation. You already know the story that was surrounding this organization. So we don't have to revisit that. However, John, as you enter year 3 of his tenure, ever since he walked into the door off of 16 and Kirby, the only 2 things that I can honestly say Nick Caserio has done right as the GM was the picks that he got back for Deshaun Watson, of course, especially given everything that Deshaun had going on off the field that kind of like delayed all of this. And 2, and most importantly, like I keep mentioning, the draft 2021 and 2022. And I'm expecting him to have another solid draft class. Well, another good draft class this year. Go ahead.
Does Laramie Tunsil count? I think.
Yes, Laramie Tunsil count. So that's 3. But other than that, you're looking at a general manager who has built a team that has won only 7 games in 2 years. He's now on his 3rd head coach. And the players that he brought in, we have seen him favor guys like a Rex Burkhead over a Marlon Mack. When we take a look at the production of both of those guys, yes, we understand that Marlon Mack wasn't the player that he was at the early stage of his career. However, when you take a look at how this run game was, when you take a look at the fact that this organization needed a number 2 running back, I would never understand why in the world did Nick Caserio have in mind to keep Rex Burkhead on the 53-man roster for the entire season and let somebody like Marlon Mack go. Later on in the season, you did the exact same thing with Eno Benjamin. You take a look at the Johnson brothers. You was here, like, even you take a look at the last game of the season. A lot of people talk about this. There was no reason for a guy like Brandon Cooks to be suiting up. There was no reason for a guy like Jordan Akins to be suiting up. There was no reason for you to put your best guys out there and messing up the number 1 overall pick. And speaking of Brandon Cooks, of course, I think we all can agree that it was a big mistake on his part that he did not move on from Brandon Cooks at the trade deadline. You probably would have got something better back in return than what you already got. So I say all that just to say, look, Nick Caserio and the Houston Texans, they are committed to each other as of right now. But if things go bad this season in one way or another, John, this is something that you and I talked about the day after Lovie Smith got fired. This guy is going to be the next guy walking out the door off of 16 and Kirby.
Yeah, I would like to put it like this. Right now, I think the Houston Texans and general manager Nick Caserio and possibly D'Amico Ryans, who just got here, but they are in the marriage counselor stage
which is a good thing.
Which can be looked at as a good thing, right? When you go through marriage counseling, you kind of want to put everything out on the table. You want to be open. You want to be honest. You want to say, hey, listen, these are some of the areas that I think you are doing pretty good in, sweetheart, in this case, general manager. But at times, in his case, most of the times, there's been some bad areas that has been overshadowing the good things that Nick Caserio has been doing. Now, I don't want to overshadow this offseason. I do believe that it was a great combination between D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio working on bringing in these free agents, excuse me, during the free agent period. I think that this was a good free agent period for Houston. Free agency period for Houston, excuse me. And this was the first season that Nick Caserio actually had some money to spend, right? So there's so many different factors that we have to look at. But the fact of the matter is, we saw the demeanor change. We're hearing some of the small things as long as ownership approves. A few months ago, if I'm not the right guy, like there is an understanding that because of the role that you played when we didn't have anybody else, we're going to allow you some more time. But that time can be cut short soon, very soon, if you are not succeeding in your role. Cody, you were there at the press conference. What was the overall feeling and mood in the building?
Clarity, because now everyone has gotten a sense that Nick Caserio isn't leaving, especially 2 weeks after the draft. That never made sense to any of us, because why would you help build a roster just to jet 2 weeks after the draft, a month after free agency? So that never made sense. But most importantly, of course, this was Nick Caserio's pre-draft press conference. John, listeners and viewers, when I tell you that Nick Caserio, D'Amico Ryans, and everybody else that's in that war room as of right now, they are weighing every option possible to make sure that they build a competitive and a better football team, especially one that can be better than the product that we saw over the last 2 seasons. That was the overall theme.
Yeah. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. You've heard us talk a lot about the mobile app game here on the Locked On Texans podcast. If you've always thought about, maybe I can be a good general manager, maybe I can be better than Nick Caserio, or maybe I can be just as good in the first round as Rick Smith was, even better in the later rounds than Rick Smith was, then you got to give this game a try and opportunity, because let me tell you something right now. Being a general manager and creating a dynasty is not as easy as some of y'all may think. When you play Ultimate Football GM, you get to control and manage every strategic aspect of your team as you play through seasons and lead your team to glory, trying to build a historic dynasty. Listen, you hire the right coaches and coordinators. You go out there and you manage all of the finances, including negotiating player salaries and terms. You navigate your franchise through the free agency, draft injuries, player personnel issues, and all of the ups and downs of a season. All of this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go when you want to, as you want to. Our Locked On Texan listeners, we got something for you. You get a 100% free boost to your franchise whenever you use promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps. So make sure you check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. Welcome back in, Locked On Texan listeners and viewers out there in the YouTube world. Of course, John Hick and Cody Davis. Cody, the talk of the town really isn't Nick Caserio addressing him leaving. I mean, I think that's a major talking point. I can't deny it, no doubt about it. But an idea that you, myself, and other people have, in some of these spaces, not Twitter spaces, but some of the media spaces, have played around with and talked about, maybe on and more so off camera, if Houston doesn't have the person that they really want at 2, will they move on from it? And that was something that came out of Nick Caserio's mouth today. Like, there's a possibility we can move on from the number 2 overall pick. And that just brings me back because I believe we have another clip as well to play. That brings me back, ladies and gentlemen, to the flexibility and optionality. Now, Cody, while you were in the building, did you get either a sense or were you informed of any decision that the Houston Texans could make at the quarterback position?
Yeah. Options are still open, and if they don't select a quarterback at 2, put it like this, they will definitely leave the 2023 draft with a quarterback, but not just any old quarterback, a quarterback that can potentially, how can I put this?
I'm going to help you out, guys.
Be promising in the near future.
I want to say this because there's only so much that can be, said in terms of what you heard while you're in the building. But I do want to say that age can just be a number. And I would also say that how the game of football is, much less violent than it's been in the past, that does allow for players to have more of a sense of longevity, especially at the quarterback position. So I want to put that out there because maybe if Houston doesn't go with quarterback at 2 and they trade back, could get very interesting come next Thursday.
Brandon, we've received some calls actually on the number 2 pick. So I think our job and responsibility is to listen, not rule anything out. And I think whatever the end result is, come Thursday, we'll be prepared to go either way. So if you want to quote me, are we open for business? I'd say we're open to listening. So if you want to change the vocabulary this year a little bit, but we have received a few calls. And again, I think our responsibility is to listen, to try to take the information in and then just make the right decision.
One of the more honest responses and clear to the point responses from Nick Caserio, normally what we like to call here in Houston in the Houston media, a bunch of word salad. But that was, and I believe that was Brandon K. Scott's question, right? Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
sir.
So that was our boy's question. And I like that question because that was an opportunity for Nick Caserio to be candid. I thought that of all of the interviews that Nick Caserio has hosted, meetings and press conferences since he's arrived, he's had very little candid moments, and I thought that was one of them in terms of being a general manager. So they are listening. They are receiving calls. Houston next Thursday could possibly pick at 2, or I don't know, man. Like, I'm going to give it over to you, Cody, but if you trade number 2, who jumps up? Who nabs the quarterback? Because I believe whoever would trade up will be looking for their quarterback. But then at 3, do you risk Arizona getting the guy that you really like in Will Anderson? Like, there's a lot there that I think just wouldn't – I don't know. If you're big on one guy and he's gone, but you have another guy on your draft board that you're really big on, I don't see the Houston Texans risking 2 Bama guys that they really like. I really would love to see that deal that they would get back for that.
I don't see it either, John. But the one thing that I did take away from this is, first and foremost, and I think this is most important when you start looking at how or whether or not Nick Caserio is going to start willing and dealing these draft picks. The Houston Texans have 4 picks in the top 100, plain and simple. And every single one of those picks, of course, are valuable. So I don't see the Texans trading the number 2 overall pick because it's too much at risk, like you mentioned, because not only are you putting yourself in jeopardy to lose out on Will Anderson, but the other teams that I'm looking at that can possibly trade up to that number 2 overall pick, and we talked about this a couple of days ago, the Indianapolis Colts, the Tennessee Titans, and the Detroit Lions. They could possibly trade up and go up there and get CJ. 2 of those 3 teams that I just mentioned are in your division, so I highly doubt that Nick Caserio and the Texans will make that trade. And then with the Detroit Lions, as of right now, and of course, I'm not in Detroit, don't have any sources or anything like that, but from what I'm hearing around the league, especially from our guy over at Locked On Lions, they're not really too big on getting a quarterback at least this year. Jared Goff has went there and it helped bring some relevancy back to that organization. However, John, when I take a look at pick number 12, when I take a look at number 33, 65, and 73, of course, 65 and 73 are 2 picks in the 3rd round. I definitely will consider those picks a possibility for Nick Caserio and the Houston Texans to trade. He even talked about that early on in his press conference. He mentioned that they are definitely still weighing all of their options, and they're not going to rule out moving any one of these picks.
12 is the pick that I can see Houston trading, right? And I think that, and I think 12 can be a pick that they could use and leverage that with a pick that they have next year to trade back into the top 10 to go get somebody, or they see more value in getting more picks back. Some of that Patriot way of thinking. But you got some guys at that edge position that you may, really like and can come in Houston and possibly start day one. And you also look at the wide receiver position. As much as I love Jackson Smith and Jigma, they may like Zay Flowers. They may like Quentin Johnson out of TCU, who's had a top 30 visit with him, right? So they may like some of these guys. And I think with a week left, we got to stop a lot of the speculation that we want and look at what the Houston Texans have been doing. And trading out of 12 makes sense for this team. I mean, not that it makes sense, but you can see it happening in the foreseeable future, which is next Thursday.
I like what you just said. We need to stop looking at the Houston Texans on what we want them to do and look at what they need.
Look at the track record.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up because, of course, John, everybody, and Nick Caserio isn't blind to this because he probably answered about 16, 17 questions, I want to say. And out of those 16, 17 questions, at least 8 of them had everything to do with the quarterback position.
Right. There's actually one before I don't want to mean to cut you off, but there's one that is it possible you guys can come out of this draft without a quarterback? His response to that question, Nick Caserio, was anything is possible. I think what's possible, and yeah, right. I think what's possible and what the hope is that we can come out of this draft with good football players. We think can help our football team. That's what we're focused on doing. Like he gives you a candid, real moment, and then he says stuff like that. But the quarterback position is going to keep coming up for this team.
And it's supposed to because I had an opportunity to ask him, what are you guys going to do if you don't draft a quarterback? Are you going to stick with Davis Mills or are you going to explore the free agency a little bit more? Or are you going to trade for a quarterback? Hopefully Lamar Jackson, but I think that ship has sailed. But here's what Nick Caserio had to say.
I mean, anything's possible. I think it's what's possible, and what the hope is that we can come out of this draft with good football players that we think can help our football team. And that's what we're focused on doing.
Hey, Nick, similar to that question, if you guys do pass up on an opportunity to draft a quarterback, what would be the plan moving forward? Would it be to stick with Davis Mills, or would it be to address it rather trade or free agency?
Yeah, I think we've been consistent. Take it one day at a time. We'll look at our options and what those entail. We won't eliminate anything and just try to make good decisions. So, I mean, that's really the decision-making, matrix and process that we're going to go through, that we go through today, we're going to go through tomorrow, that we'll go through next Thursday, that we'll go through Friday, that we'll go through in the spring, in May, June, when we go to September, and then, we'll be ready to play whatever day we're going to play, whoever we're going to play the opening game.
The Houston Texans do not draft a quarterback at number 2. And of course, that means they're going to pass on the opportunity to draft CJ. John, we open up this segment talking about, the possibility of the Texans still coming away with a quarterback. I do believe if they don't draft CJ with number 2, pick number 33 will go to a quarterback.
I can see that, and let's not even beat around the bush. If Hendon Hooker, out of Tennessee, who's coming off of ACL injury, 25 years old. I think he'll be 26 when the season starts. If he's still available at 33, and we are hearing a lot of talk around the league, not necessarily Cody and myself, but you can tune in on ESPNs and NFL networks or Twitter. Hendon Hooker is a quarterback prospect that a lot of teams like late.
Yeah.
And some guys may, is hovering in the top 30 or 45, maybe look at trading up to go get that kind of guy, like a guy that that can sit. You have a vet already, who can start this year. And Hendon Hooker is a player that played in that vert offense for the Volunteers, and very QB friendly offense. And so if it's Hendon at 33,
but you got to still get Will Anderson at 2, because the thought that people are looking at Hendon Hooker is that, of course, if you miss out on Bryson CJ, Hendon Hooker is a guy, if he was healthy, they will be considering him as the third best quarterback in this draft class. Not Will Levis, not Anthony Richardson. Yeah. The only reason why those two guys passed,
I think AR would still have that hype. Will Levis for sure. he would.
But you're looking at a situation to where maybe 2-3 years down the line, the Houston Texans are looking at this to say, well, you know what? We already know Will Anderson, as long as he stay healthy, he got that hunger, he got that drive, he got the talent. He could be something special in this league. That could be your foundational piece on the defensive side of the ball. And when you take a look at Hendon Hooker, once again, you're talking about a guy, 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, over 3,000 yards. That can possibly be your franchise quarterback moving forward. If not franchise, of course, quality starter that can honestly help jumpstart this offense. If not this season, for sure next season once he's 100% healthy.
Welcome back in, Locked On Texan listeners and viewers. Once again, thank you guys for subscribing to the Locked On Texan podcast. I do want to say this. I said it once, I'll say it again. If the Texans go Will Anderson at 2, if they can use and leverage that number 12th overall pick to trade back up, and you understand this, you are getting rid of that first round pick for next year. One of them, you have 2, thanks to Cleveland. And if CJ Stroud is off the board, then I think you swing for the fences on a high ceiling guy, and that'll be Anthony Richardson. And I believe that Nick Caserio was asked about the success the San Francisco 49ers were able to have with the type of quarterbacks that they've had. And I believe his response was something along the lines of, we take it away and look at things that are successful. So having him and Anthony Richardson and putting him in an offense that's favorable to him, but he can get out on the edge, use his legs, and make some of these throws that's easy for him. You got to swing for the fences if you don't go with the best 2 quarterbacks, and you won't get one of them. So if you don't go the other one, then try to swing for the fences.
I get what you're saying, and I agree, because like I mentioned, in my opinion, I think Hooker would be the third best quarterback if he was healthy. However, that's the whole thing. If he was healthy, when I take a look at the success that Nick Caserio needs now, when I take a look at the success that the Houston Texans need now, John, this goes back to something that you just said. We need to stop looking at the Houston Texans on what we want them to do and focus on what they need to do. And
what they probably, their track record shows they will do, which.
Exactly. And I just keep thinking, there is no possible way, no disrespect to Davis Mills. I still think he could be a pretty solid, decent quarterback in this league, but there is no possible way that this franchise can afford. There's no possible way this franchise can't afford to have Davis Mills keep this starting job for another season. Even if you do go out and get Hooker and, next year he redshirt or whatever the case might be, they just can't afford it, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we'll see how the Texans do it, man. Bryce Young cancels his top 30 visits with everybody else. He has only met with the Texans and Panthers, and that makes sense because he ain't going no lower than 2, right?
Oh, man.
I'll say this. Frank Wright, man, the Panthers could still be playing chess and not checkers.
John, I understand that this is Locked On Texans. But last year for the Rockets, I covered a draft where the Orlando Magic had everybody believing that they was taking Jabari Smith. And it wasn't until the day of the draft where they say, you know what, we're taking Paolo. Look how that turned out. So that's all I'm saying. I keep thinking maybe, just maybe, that can still be a possibility. We had Sheena Quick on a couple days ago, and according to her, the Panthers are still weighing their options. So it's still a slight chance that Bryce Young can fall to 2. I think if Bryce Young goes 1, I think that's when we're going to see the floodgates open about the possibilities of what the Houston Texans do. But if Carolina say with the number 1 overall pick and they say CJ, you definitely know without a shadow of a doubt Bryce is definitely coming.
Yeah, they gonna listen. They gonna 4-4. No, let me see. If Carolina drafts CJ Stroud, they may run a 4-flat 40 to run their ass down with that paper.
Oh man.
Before anybody say, hold on, there's been a mistake like Moonlight when they won, and they was oh, we got the paper right here. Guys, continue to check us out throughout the week, right? We're going to continuously talk about what the Houston Texans should do. We're going to eventually get back to our mock draft. It's just been so much. We're going to give you guys a Locked On Texans extra whenever we put that out just to finish up the rounds. I'm just curious to see what they do, man. And like what I want people to understand before we close out, whatever decision is made, this is year 1 in DeMeco Ryans' tenure. And he won't be a one and done coach. DeMeco Ryans, I believe, will at the very least see 4 years of this contract.
4?
At the very least, he will see 4 years of this contract. And during that 4-year stretch, you got 2 first-rounders this year. Right now, you still have 2 for next year. Got some good draft capital. Next year, you're going to have a whole hell of a lot of more money. Got your bunch of your best players are on rookie contracts right now. So you're not going to see a real massive for your homegrown players contract outside of what Laremy Tunsil just got. We'll see what Titus Howard gets, and I'm curious to see where Houston prioritizes that. That's something we talked about a lot. I think back in January. Where does DeMeco Ryans prioritizes Titus Howard, the new head coach, and now is DeMeco Ryans. And so I think he'll see at least 4 of those years, man. And in year 1 is right now. You still have the stench of what happened before you. I mean, Lovie Smith could have set you up right, but he said, and got up out of here. But by year 3, that is where I think realistic expectations from around the league really start to cook and set in. Thank you guys for checking out today's episode of the Locked On Texan podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. Also, take those same thumbs, scroll over to YouTube, and give us a YouTube subscription as well. Also, like and comment on the YouTube page while you're at it.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at Cody Davis _24. Once again, that's Cody COTYDAVIS _24. Really quick, fun story. Walk into the press conference room, bumped into Christian Harris, chopped it up with him a little bit, asked Christian Harris how's offseason going. Are you ready for season 2? He said, most definitely, man. We ready to get started. Just wanted to throw that out there just to show that there's a lot of excitement in the building with the players, because I had those moments with players the last 2 seasons, more so last year, not so much when Cully was here, only because that was the whole COVID year and the excitement really wasn't there like that. But of course, like I mentioned, Christian Harris, he is ready to get started, man. So, but until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.